Hey everyone, Derrick Hines here. Welcome to the podcast where I'll share with you the patterns, insights, research, and technologies that we use in my own pain and performance practice to help people improve their health, speed their healing, and increase their longevity. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy it. Good day, my friends. I hope y'all are doing fantastic. I've got some good stuff for you today. We have Dr. Glenn Livingston on the podcast where we talk about a topic that I've had many conversations around with patients, and that is changing eating habits. A lot of my patients, as we start talking about accelerating their results, so they get started and we're starting the healing process, and then we start having the conversation around how do we start adding or changing these other lifestyle factors that could really accelerate their results. A big part of that is the fuel you put in your body every day and the quality of that. The better the quality food that we eat, the better every system in our body is going to function. And so how do we start to improve that? The issue around eating is that we all have to do it. So it's not a habit you can pick up and put down, such as smoking. It's not something you have to do. So when people get away from it, they can kind of remove themselves from that situation. And this is something we talk about in this episode. We do need to start working on kind of changing how we think about food and how we set up the rules around our own kind of eating structure so we can be successful. And the nice thing I think about what Dr. Livingston talks about is it's very achievable things. He starts in a very, very clear way. If you really want to do a deep dive on this, listen to this episode, but go back and listen to episode number 97 with Dr. David Wiss as well. These two pair very, very well together. And they really can help you start to change your eating habits in a very, very big way. Dr. Glenn tells us about his journey overcoming this. So he's not just somebody who's getting up here and spouting off research and theory. He's these are the things that I have done to improve my eating habits, my health, and to lose over 100 pounds, I believe. But these are the things that my patients actively see and improve. So I see the same thing. I've used a lot of the information that he brings up in this episode. We all do need to eat. If you don't feel like your eating habit's the best or your relationship with food is the best, I think this is a great episode. Pick up the things that help you. If you don't find some of these kind of tips serve you, I promise there's some stuff in there that will help improve your relationship with how you eat, what you eat, when you have those triggering cravings. How do you overcome those in the moment and what you can do to improve those choices and responses? So really good episode. I hope you enjoy it. Use some of this information. Hit us up on the socials and let us know what you think. What was your big takeaway? I always like to hear from y'all on these things. Very, very powerful information here. We all need to improve that stuff a lot of times. So I hope you enjoy this episode with Dr. Glenn Livingston. Thanks for listening, y'all. All right, Dr. Glenn Livingston, welcome to the Pain and Performance Podcast.
Thank you, Dr. Derrick Hines. It's nice to be here.
I feel like this is quite fitting. When this will drop is probably, let's say, definitely early part of 2024. And I think I've already probably talked to, 10 patients of mine who have okay, this year I'm changing a few things about my health, but eating is definitely at the top of the priority list. I'm sure that you get a lot more requests and information this time of year, and people trying to start new habits around eating, change habits around eating. What's your go-to response when somebody says that early in the year?
Well, I'm actually the traditional view on New Year's resolutions is that they don't work. I think that people are giving the wrong information about how to make them work. So I'm actually in favor of New Year's resolutions. I think that the people are told to follow, guidelines and giving very squishy advice, which don't really help people to enforce the commitments that they're trying to make. And we wouldn't give people that squishy advice in other areas of life, really. It's very interesting. So I will ask them, well, what's the simplest, easiest, most achievable thing that you could do in the direction that you want to go without any possibility of failure? I try to help people to set a low bar, a very specific bar, but set a low bar. An example could be I'll always put my fork down between bites, or I'll never go back for seconds, or I won't eat in front of a screen or something like that. I tell them to set a low bar so that they observe themselves successfully doing it day in and day out. Because if you do that, your identity function will kick in and you will say, oh my goodness, I must be someone who doesn't go back for seconds. I must be someone as opposed to what most people do, which is this feast and famine roller coaster where it's like the old poem, I think Henry Wadsworth, I forget his name, Longfellow, I'm in trouble for not quoting him correctly, but he said, there once was this little girl, and when she was good, she was very, very good, but when she was bad, she was horrid. That's how most people live in this feast and famine roller coaster. Like you teach your brain that you live in an environment where famine is possible, then don't act surprised when you suddenly make calories available and you want to hoard them. So flood your body with nutrition at a slight caloric deficit if you need to lose weight. And the other thing about one simple rule starting with a low bar, unless there's a medical emergency, but starting with a low bar is that, most people around this time of year, their motivation runs really high.
Hmm.
Um, what you need to do is set up something that you can do when you don't have your mojo. When you wake up in a foul mood and you don't feel like going to the gym and all you can think about is getting out to McDonald's and, having your typical 42,000 calorie breakfast over there. Um, what is it that you can do day in and day out, even when you don't feel like it? That's how you affect change, not with these manic depressive
I think that
ideas.
was one of the things that I liked about kind of digging into some of your information is that it does kind of walk into the psychology of changing the view of who we are. Like I love the idea of like all of our actions are just votes for who we think we are, and the more we do those little actions, that builds up, and your brain starts to say, well, yeah, I haven't maybe lost the weight that I wanted to lose yet. I haven't done this, but I'm the type of person who puts my fork down.
Yes,
That
yes,
is incredibly powerful as we tap into the power of that, because now, at least from the way that we talk with patients about it, now you're not fighting against your brain and the habits that it wants to do for survival. Right now, you're trying to tap into that for the positive. Can you expand on that a little bit for us?
yeah. Um, well, well, first of all, I just want to highlight the benefit of that. I always say that overcoming overeating or food addiction is not about giving up any particular food. It's about moving your difficult food decisions from your impulses and your emotions and your whims to your intellect. It's about eating with your head. It's not really sexy, but that's what it's really about. And when you do eat with your head, the panic disappears. I talk to all these people. Sometimes they have 100, even 200 pounds to lose, and they feel like they have to lose it really quickly, but they're in this state of panic because they don't really understand what's going on. And when they can prove to themselves that they're capable of managing their impulses, their food impulses, with even one simple rule, they're capable of making an intellectual decision, then there's a shift in terms of who's in charge. Is it you and your best thinking, or is it this, reptilian impulse that takes you, into this primitive world where the food manufacturers can really, really get your goat? Um, so I always say that character trumps willpower. Ca- Character is nothing but what we habitually do at the time of impulse. For example, if I were to walk into a diner and the waitress says, I'll be right back, I'm going to get your menu, and I happen to notice there's $20 on the table from the last guest that she had, I don't feel tempted to take that money. And the reason I don't feel tempted to take that money is because of my character. I'm not a thief. I habitually leave money on the table when I know it belongs to someone else. It's just who I am. I don't have to agonize about that decision. And agonizing about decisions is what wears down your willpower. Willpower is just the ability to make good decisions, and there are only so many that we can make over the course of the day. So starting with one simple rule, it does a bunch of things. it sets up a tripwire and starts you on a behavior that can build your identity. But it sets up this tripwire so that you know when the reptilian brain is active. See, if you're told just eat well 90% of the time and indulge yourself 10%, great idea in theory, right? Great idea in
Right.
theory, but in practice, how do you know which is the 90% and which is the 10%? So every time you're in the coffee shop and there's a chocolate bar on the counter, and there's this little voice in your head that says, go ahead, you worked out hard enough, you're not going to gain any weight, you have to make another chocolate decision. But if you say, I only ever have chocolate on Saturday afternoons after a workout, then your chocolate decisions have been made for you and you don't have to agonize like that anymore. And you'll find that the constant thinking about food starts to dissipate in the same way that if a slot machine only paid off on Saturday mornings, you wouldn't find those little old ladies in the casino all during the week glued to the machines, right?
Right.
So if you know that you can only have chocolate on Saturday mornings, then your brain is not going to keep firing impulses to try to get it during the week because the brain is very efficient. It wants to conserve energy and acquire as many calories for the least effort, and that would be a waste of energy. Um,
Yeah, one of the things that not to completely get you off track, but that I've probably followed for, I don't know, 7 or 8 years, and I've had many patients who followed for that long, is the concept of having like an off day where like, hey, yeah, I'm really strict for 6 days a week. And then I have a day that's like a prescribed day where I can kind of get off. There's still structure to it. Like I used to probably, a long time ago, it was a much worse cheat day, if you want to call it a cheat day. But what it did was like if someone brought donuts to our office, I love our patients. We have the best patients in the world. They bring a lot of sweets. It gave you space. So like, on Thursday morning, like, man, that looks really good. I'll have one of those for my off day, which is
yeah,
usually Saturday, sometimes Sunday, sometimes prescribed around a holiday. And sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes it would come to Saturday morning and I'd be like, actually, I'm not gonna feel good today. Like I have a Saturday. If I eat that to start, that's not how I want to start my day. Sometimes I'm like, I really still craved it. This is why I have an off day. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna indulge in that. Um, but having that space between the craving, if you will, and the reward of it was really valuable, for me for sure, to like be able to be very strict for those like kind of 6 days and then have like, I'm not saying no forever, I'm saying no right now.
yeah, yeah. And two out of three people can work that out really well. You happened your way into it, something that a lot of bodybuilders do, and a lot of our clients who are successful do. We don't call it an off day though. We call it an eating by design day, and it's kind of like if your everyday routine is a very well defined bullseye. Um, like I don't eat bread during the week, but on the weekend I can have two slices at a restaurant when I'm socializing. Um, if it's very clear and it has boundaries, then you don't have to make decisions on the weekends either. What doesn't tend to work is a no holds barred day. I don't care if you want to make a day where you plan to have 8,000 calories, but I think that you should have a boundary so that your reptilian brain never thinks that it's in charge. It's kind of like this thing inside you is a little dangerous. Like we live with a brain structure that worked 100,000 years ago, but in the modern food environment, which is filled with fat cats in white suits with mustaches laughing all the way to the bank every time we look for love in a bag or a box or a container. Um, they've got millions, if not billions, of dollars that are targeted at the bliss point of your reptilian brain without giving you the nutrition to feel satisfied. It the no holds bar, just trust your instincts thing doesn't really work for most people that I work with. So we draw a second rung around the bullseye instead. Said, okay, I'm going to make it my task a little easier. I'm not going to shoot for the center of the bullseye. I'm just going to hit kind of general target, and that's okay. That works
Yeah.
out well for two out of three people, and it varies from substance to substance also. Sometimes people have to give up something or another, but
Yeah.
usually not.
I definitely want to come back to that. I've heard you mention that like two out of three can kind of make these modifications. One third, we kind of have to kind of, almost like, treat it kind of in a never category. But I want to come back to that because I've heard you talk about how like industry kind of taps into our vulnerability of our reptilian brain and how those two are kind of connected. Can we double click on that and kind of go into how maybe our weakness of the reptilian brain is affected by the way we are sold, communicated with, fed foods through industry?
Well, 100,000 years ago, food was relatively scarce, or much more scarce than it is now. And we had to spend most of our time and energy hunting, gathering, acquiring resources, right? And accordingly, as a survival advantage, the people who developed stronger cravings, who felt more motivated when they saw signals that indicated that food was available, they were more likely to survive. So let's take a caveman, we'll call him Thag, Thag, and let's say that he discovers that you can follow a monkey to a banana tree. Um, as soon as Thag sees a monkey, his brain gives him a big hit of dopamine and says, follow that monkey. And if he doesn't follow the monkey, Thag's brain lowers his dopamine and says, I'm going to make you miserable until you follow that monkey, right? Thag follows the monkey. He gorges himself on the bananas. He's really happy. He has a new pattern. And now it's more efficient for his brain to go gathering, in this case, for bananas, but looking for monkeys, right? Um, in the modern food environment, it doesn't require anywhere near as much of an effort. There are um, very clear signals, and the food industry has made those signals ever clearer. They use a diversity of coloring on the packaging, and in nature, a diversity of color is a signal for a diversity of micronutrients, right? That's why we
Right.
say eat the rainbow, right?
Yeah.
Green lettuce, blueberries, red tomatoes, yellow carrots, put it all together in a big salad, and you've got a diversity of micronutrients. Um, in industry, they often put the money into the packaging and the way that the product looks, by beefing it up with all types of chemicals and fillers and everything like that, so that your brain thinks that there's a diversity of micronutrients and there is a wealth of calories available, um, but it's really not. And the calories are concentrated into such a small space, like it would be very hard to eat 2,000 calories of bananas, right? But it's not that hard to, have a cheeseburger and get, or super deluxe double cheeseburger and French fries and get 2,000 calories for very little effort and really not that much money. Um, and so we have a warped situation where the things that our brains have been designed for are being hijacked. Like everybody says they don't like fruit and vegetables. That's why they can't seem to lose weight. But not liking fruit and vegetables is because we're constantly being presented with these hyperpalatable concentrations of starch and sugar and fat and excitotoxins and salt. And it's so overstimulating to the reptilian brain, and the reptilian brain says, this is our survival stuff. We got to get as many resources as we can with the least amount of energy possible, or we're going to die. So your brain thinks that it's going to die if it doesn't have those potato chips or, you know, food bar or whatever it is that you're addicted to. And then the then the packaging industry, there are some chemicals that will make it hard for you to know when you're hungry or full. Um, the advertising industry is very good at associating all of these food signals with, you know, the acquisition of a mate or the acquisition of popularity or wealth or status, and so you put that all together and you combine it with the fact that the reptilian brain is set up to see food as an emergency, right? The reptilian brain is set up to say, well, this is a scarce resource. When it's available, we have to push our rational mind out of the way. The rational mind is for thinking and strategizing and long-term planning, but the reptilian brain says when when this stuff is available, we have to stop thinking and just go get it. So you put that all together, and it's just a perfect storm for obesity and overeating in our culture today. There's a way out, but yeah, there's a perfect
Yeah,
storm.
that like you listen to some of that stuff, and I think a lot of people who have tried to change their eating pattern, lose weight, get healthier, have thought like, oh, this is all just like I just need to be more disciplined to make these changes, and it's just that I'm fighting my own discipline. And then I hear that, and I'm like, this seems bigger. There's more factors at play here,
Yeah.
where where we need to make a better plan to change it instead of just telling people like just make better food choices. Yes, that might be like the action that needs to happen, but I think the way that we get to that is probably more strategic than we're giving patients and we're giving people in a lot of situations. You say there's a way out, and I know we don't have to unpack everything, but like, what are the steps to overcoming this like industry communication? The food that we're getting is tapping into the wrong brain centers and making us think that we need more of that food because that's the only thing available, dot, dot, dot. Like, how do we start to break that cycle?
Okay. Well, first of all, you need a plan. If you don't have a plan, you're going to be part of someone else's. I forgot who said that, but it's very true in this situation. And that starts with one simple rule. We talked about possibilities before. Once you have one simple rule, you um, you have a way to wake up. By the way, I used to be almost 300 pounds and have ridiculous triglycerides and all kinds of medical problems. And I suffered with this for 20, 25 years before I figured this all out in my 40s. Um, I'm not just a doctor who works with overeaters. I'm someone who had a really serious problem myself. And the reason I struggled for so long was that I kept thinking just what you were saying. This is all me. I must have a hole in my heart. And so I need to go figure out my traumas and heal them and cry and scream and confess my sins. And I did all that. I went to Overeaters Anonymous. I saw a psychiatrist. I took medication. I did all that. It didn't really work. A little thinner, a lot fatter, a little thinner, a lot fatter. Um, so you need a plan. And that starts with at least one simple rule. Once you have that, then the moment that you identify a thought or feeling or image in your brain that suggests that you break the plan. And the example I gave before was, it'll be just as easy to start your silly diet tomorrow. You worked out hard enough. One bite's not going to hurt, right? Um, you you wake up and you take a couple of breaths. It's better to breathe out for longer than you breathe in. The reason for that has to do with deactivating that sense of false emergency that the food industry is so good at stimulating. Remember, the sense of false emergency is what knocks out your rational thinking. So you want to get back in your right brain. Say, okay, I'm awake. Now, the way I did this way back then, I called my reptilian brain my inner pig. I should have called it my food monster or something, but I wasn't going to teach this stuff. So I called it my inner pig. And when I heard it talk about just starting tomorrow, I'd say, wait a minute, that's not me. That's my inner pig. Chocolate on a Wednesday is pig slop. I don't eat pig slop. I don't let farm animals tell me what to do. It's just something really abrasive that would wake me up.
Yeah.
You call it your food monster. You can do the same thing. Um, then you take these breaths. Laurie Hammond calls them 7-11 breaths, where you breathe in for a count of 7 and out for a count of 11.
And this is like when you're kind of in the midst of a craving, like I see the chocolate, like, oh, I want one of those. Okay, fine. Stop for a second. Let's take the breath.
Yeah, at least one,
Gotcha. Okay.
preferably 3. A 7-11 breath works because if you were in an actual emergency, like you were being chased by a hungry bear, you would have to be huffing and puffing, and you wouldn't have time to do that.
Yeah.
So the 7-11 breaths activates the part of your nervous system, you know this better than I do, called the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the part of our nervous system that says it's okay to rest and digest. And it essentially puts us into a state of relaxed, rational being rather than urgent, irrational doing. Okay, so you do that to get into your right head. Then you write down what your inner pig is saying or your inner food monster is saying. Writing is an upper brain activity. Binging, overeating is a lower activity. So just the act of writing down what it says gets you even further into your right mind, and it moves the battleground from the lower primitive impulses to your neocortex, where you have a fighting chance to be more rational. Um, then you ask yourself, why does the pig say that I should break my plan specifically? You've written that down. And then you ask yourself, why is the pig wrong? How is it logically wrong? For example, when my pig would say, you could just start again tomorrow, it'll be just as easy and you worked out hard enough, one bite won't hurt. I could say a whole bunch of things to show why it was wrong. First of all, the way the brain works, what fires together wires together. So if I have a craving for chocolate and I indulge that craving for chocolate at the same time as I have the thought, let's start again tomorrow, I will have reinforced both of those things. So tomorrow I'll have a stronger craving for chocolate and I'll be more likely to say, let's start again tomorrow. So if you're in a hole, man, stop digging. If you're in a hole, stop digging. You can only ever use the present moment to be healthy. Um, Also, we all know it's never going to be just one bite unless I planned it very specifically like that a couple of days before. Um, and 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 one bite is the difference between who's in charge, me or my pig. I don't want to be the pig's slave. I want to be the pig's master. So for these reasons, I know that the pig is wrong. Now, what that does is takes away my excuse. It takes away my excuse. I could still have the chocolate if I wanted to. I can't take away your free will. But what I can do is wake you up and make it uncomfortable for you to indulge. Um, the other thing you can do is ask yourself, why would I be a happier or better person if I stayed with my plan? And in my case, it's because then I can be free from worry about cardiovascular disease and diabetes, kidney disease, and all the things that tend to happen in my family starting around 40. I don't have very good genetics at all. I can walk in the world as a tall, relatively thin man that exudes a smiling presence and can be a leader and do the things I want to do in the world. I can be in a relationship. I can attract the kind of women that I want. There are all kinds of reasons why staying on my plan is better than breaking my plan. That's the way that I got better. Since that point, I've had 2 million readers and 2,000 clients, and a whole bunch of coaches that work with me to help people do that. And we've seen what people do well with and what they don't. And there's another piece of the puzzle. And the other piece of the puzzle is removing the rest of the organismic distress, which causes that emergency, screw it, just do it reaction. Because we would measure results very carefully, and we'd find around the 1 month mark, we could get people to an almost 90% reduction in, it was 89.4%, I think, in overeating episodes. But around the 6 month mark, about half those people stopped doing it. And when we asked them why did they stop doing that, it was because they eventually got to this screw it, just do it place. Yeah, I know the pig is wrong. Yeah, I don't have any excuses. Yeah, I feel like a piece of crap for doing this, but I'm going to do it anyway because, oh, well, what the hell? And a deep investigation into what caused that was organismic distress. The biggest culprit was a lack of proper nutrition. People they're constantly trying to make up for their overeating mistakes by starving themselves or going on a 1 meal a day plan or something like that. And I know there are medical benefits to doing that. I think there's some research lately that says maybe they're not as good as we thought they were, but there are so I'm not disputing that. But for the first 3 to 6 months that you want to stop overeating, I would recommend that you have 3 meals a day, at least 3 meals a day. Flood your body with nutrition at a slight caloric deficit, because inevitably when we ask people, why did they say screw it, just do it? They had skipped a meal, or they had something really high glycemic the night before and they threw their blood sugar totally out of whack. Um, so you got to take care of yourself. There are some rules that you can't make. Your body needs regular nutrition. Your body also needs regular sleep and hydration. It needs break. It needs breaks from the overwhelming amount of decisions that impinge upon us in today's society. Remember, willpower is the ability to make good decisions, and there are only so many you get every day. So take 2 5-minute breaks away from everything. Put down your phone. Don't talk to your wife or your kids. Go hide in the bathroom if you have to. But 5 minutes twice a day with no decisions whatsoever where you can just breathe. Ideally, it's outside and in a sunny day in nature or something like that. But I know that that's not practical. Um, Social isolation. We are pack animals, and so feeling too alone can also increase our sense of false emergency because we were more vulnerable when we were alone in early times. This doesn't mean you have to become a social butterfly if you're an introvert, but you have to feel like there are people around that you could connect with if you wanted to. Um, and so when you put it all together, there's this um, plethora of self-regulatory activity where you actually have to pay attention to taking care of yourself. You can't live a crazy fast lifestyle and burn the candle in both ends and expect, Dr. Glenn's techniques to save you. But if you're willing to attend to these things and you observe what happens when you make a mistake and you learn everything you can from the mistake. And I always say commit with perfection when you're shooting at the target, but forgive yourself with dignity if you miss it. If you miss the target or you don't hit the bullseye, well, by how much did you miss it? In what direction? This is the benefit of having a very clearly defined bullseye. What can you learn? How do you aim better next time? And then purge your mind of that doubt and insecurity and aim at the bullseye again. Um, so I feel like I'm running through a lot of things really fast.
It's brilliant. I'm letting you go. Like this is because we're connecting on so many different levels. What we're doing with like, what's happening around it, and so I think it's a very powerful thing for people to start trying to create like conscious thoughts around it. But then when I'm not making those decisions, there's something happening, usually chemically, that makes it easier for me to cheat, right? That makes it
Yeah.
easier for me to say, screw it, just do it. When people are kind of going into this like one rule type of thing, do y'all see that certain people are more successful with certain types of rules?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's the if you like I know we went through a couple of them. What's the most common that you find are very helpful? You mentioned timed, like I'm gonna eat kind of on a time structure. Are there any other major rules that
It's actually a little harder than some of the other rules that people start with. It's a really good question. Nobody ever asked me that. Um, and I've done about 400 of these interviews, by the way, so you should feel proud of yourself. Um, a lot of times, okay, the advice is really the simplest set of rules that's going to protect you, because some people will make a rule that says I won't go back for seconds, but then they'll have so much junk in their first serving that it doesn't really do them any good and they feel like they're deteriorating. And that's not the idea. The idea is what's the lowest bar you can set to have some success and trigger the identity function. Examples of things that do work might be some people say I won't have sugar, and they'll define that as anything sweet besides whole fruit and berries or whole fruit berries and stevia or however they want to do that. Um, some people will add flour to that. So there are people who know that they've gotten to the point that they just have not been able to moderate it. And at least for a period of 60 to 90 days, they need to have an experiment without, sugar, flour, or alcohol. And surprisingly, I find that that's one of the most successful rules when people do that. I think because it just eliminates a lot of the chemical swings that are driving the cravings in the first place. Um, an example of a rule that's hard for people is I won't eat after 8 p.m. I did a whole research project on nighttime eating, um, and there's a lot to it. It has to do with how you set yourself up for the evening during the course of the day. Um, we found that I've never had people successfully stop eating at night, stop overeating at night, unless they're willing to have breakfast. Most people who are overeating at night are trying to wait as long as possible until they have their first meal, and they're creating a long fast. And that's part of what drives the craving is the brain knows that there's a long fast coming. It's a little scared of the long fast. Let me get in everything that I can.
Yeah.
Um, Interestingly, I find that for people to stop overeating at night, they have to add some cruciferous vegetables, especially during lunchtime. I don't know if there's something chemically in the cruciferous vegetables or if there's a certain amount of oral aggression and frustration that we release by chewing and chomping. Um, that we live very stressful lives, and some people say that stress is the experience of wanting to choke the heck out of someone without being able to do it, which please don't anybody do. Um, and so I think there's a certain amount of natural oral aggression built into the structure of our society and what work is in, what work entails, that getting some of that out probably, this is a hypothesis, I don't have evidence for it. All the evidence I have is that people who get better in my systems, who stop overeating at night, they add cruciferous vegetables. We call it adding crunch to your lunch. You have to create rituals in the evening so that you know exactly when nighttime is coming. It's kind of like in the vampire movies. You have to know when you're vulnerable to the vampire to set out the protective mechanism. So that could look like clapping your hands 3 times and saying dinner and done when you put everything away, or moving to another room, or brushing your teeth, or taking a shower, or removing your makeup, or something like that. Um, so that's a rule that's harder.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of the simple rules that I mentioned are the kind of rules that people start with. Um, Sometimes it has to do with there is a particular type of overeating they do when they're alone. And so they won't necessarily give up the food that they really love, but they'll say, I'll never eat pizza alone again. Right. And people are relatively successful with that. That works pretty well for people. Um,
So I
yeah.
think most of these, and this kind of goes into my like the kind of 6 on 1 designed kind of looser target day. I'll have to. I'm gonna play with this now. I've called it like an off day or a cheat day for a long time. I'm gonna play with the wording of that after this. I don't know. I don't know if you have
It's
thoughts on
a
just a
designed
design day.
indulgence. That's what it is.
There you go. I like that. So most of these are tapping into people who can kind of do this moderation type of thing. You mentioned that a third of people cannot.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that a little bit.
Um, well, I mean, you have to remember that the industry is spending billions of dollars to try to addict you. And we didn't have chocolate bars or pizza or pasta or bread or you know all of these specially concentrated forms of pleasure on the savannah. We didn't evolve with this kind of thing. And so our brains are not set up to really deal with them. And depending upon how far down the addictive rabbit hole you've gone, the brain never erases a craving. It will label the signal that triggers that craving as dormant if you no longer reward it. So if I pass the pizza place every day on the way home from work and I'm having 4 slices and I'm developing a little punch and decide I'm not going to do that anymore, I'll go through an extinction curve. We could talk about what that looks like and how to get through it. But 30 to 40 days later, the pizza place is not going to bother me anymore because my brain has labeled it dormant. However, it hasn't forgotten that the smell of the pizza place and the look of the sign and everything is a signal for the availability of a rich source of calories and a little bit of nutrition. And it would not have been an evolutionary advantage for it to forget those things. It
Yeah.
would be an evolutionary advantage for it to stay vigilant. So if you have a very strong association, um, it might be that the best you can ever do is get your brain to label it dormant, and you won't be able to go back and have it once a week or once a month or only at Christmas. Um, there's no way to really tell up front very easily. I tell people if you've tried 4 or 5 conditional rules, that's what I call the rules that allow for moderation.
Mm.
If you tried 4 or 5 conditional rules and it hasn't worked, then you probably need to abstain. But 4 or 5 tries using this whole system, not in the way you might have done it in the past, because most people don't have very clear boundaries and a methodology for dealing with the cravings and everything like that. But if you try 4 or 5 times and it's not working, then you're probably going to save yourself a lot of time and energy and pain if you just give it up. You can also have a visualization exercise where you imagine two rules. One is I'll never eat pizza again, and the other one is I'll never have pizza at a pizza place again and never by myself again, or something like that, right? Where you have a very conditional boundary on it. Then imagine it's a year from now, and imagine it in each scenario. One is where you adopted the never again rule, and the other one is where you adopted the sometimes rule. And imagine your entire day. Don't just think about how much weight you lose or whatever, but what are you going to look like in the mirror? What's your skin going to look like? What your eyes are going to look like? How clear-minded will you be? How much energy will you have? What are your relationships like? What's your productivity like? Walk through an entire day in your imagination. If you see two very similar fantasies, then it's probably worth the risk to try to do it conditionally so you don't have to give it up. Um, if you see a very different situation where, the never one comes out pretty well, but the conditional one comes out awful, then the odds are that you unconsciously know that you have to give this up. I got to tell you, it's much, much, much easier to give things up than you think it is. It's much, much, much harder to agonize for months or even years trying to find that perfect conditional rule when really what you're discovering is that you're too addicted to do that.
Yeah, I find a lot of times whenever we're trying to make those changes, making these kind of just like hard lines in the sand, so to speak, where you're like, this is it, I don't cross it. At least to get started, gives people a freedom, right? It's like I don't have to agonize over it. And I think that's where a lot of these, I don't know, I'd love to get your thought on a lot of these kind of like fad diets, but I find that's where the value actually comes in a lot of them. Whether somebody's saying I'm keto or I'm carnivore or I'm vegan. It's like there's really a freedom in decision making that comes with those things. And that's to me the value of it is you don't
Yeah,
have to agonize over it. We could
yeah,
get into the debate of is the are the foods they're actually putting in good, but the psychological aspect of not having to kind of, oh, is this good? Does this qualify? Dot dot dot. It
you've
certainly removes a lot of that.
eliminated the decision making. Yeah, yeah.
Why have we gotten to these things? What are your thoughts around all these? Because I feel like there's more today, and there's a new fad diet like every week that pops up. Is that us trying to solve this problem? Is that where some of these things come from?
No, I think it's economics. I think it's a combination of economics and people like good news about their bad behaviors, and they people don't know how to think scientifically. Like I went for 9 years of training in research and research methodology and statistics, and I understand the difference between a good study and a bad study. You know, um, Longer epidemiological studies that look at hard endpoints like heart attacks and strokes and cancer and death and things like that are better than short-term studies which look at soft endpoints like cholesterol or A1C or things that are, even though they're predictive, they're not as good as the longer term studies. And there are certain um, diet reversible or preventable diseases and conditions that won't show up for 10 years or 20 years. And so the the marketers are grabbing on these scientific studies, but they're kind of iffy scientific studies, and they're 2 year studies. They're funded by industry sometimes, and the press likes nothing better than to say, eat as much chocolate as you can, as long as it's dark chocolate, or eggs are good for you, eggs are bad for you. It's attention grabbing as a headline. I kind of wish people could see through that and I personally am a whole foods plant-based person, but I wish people could stop arguing about all this and just get rid of the junk.
Yeah.
Just get as much processed food out of your system as you can, whether you want to do, that ketogenically or macrobiotically, or you would just be so much better off. And I see that reflected in the 2,000 clients that we've worked with, I see that reflected in their results. I get about half the results that people are on what I'd call some of the more extreme diets. I'll support them if that's what they really want to do, because
Yeah.
I think that it's better than binging. It's better than how people are eating on the standard American diet.
Right.
But where I see the best results is when people just get as much of the processed stuff out of their system as they can.
Yeah, I think that's, we can argue, and we do, over what is healthy. But of all the people that I've talked to, it's very rare that we disagree on what is unhealthy. I think we all have a pretty good idea of what we should not eat. And
Yeah.
so if we get those things out, and replace them, ideally with what you're saying, but as long as those things are out, I think we're a step in the right direction.
Yeah, because you're going to have to fill the gap with something.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I
Right.
I was talking with somebody fairly recently, and she was saying she was having trouble hitting her protein goals and her fiber goal at the same time. And she was like, if I structure my day to where I hit my protein and my fiber goal both, she was like, there's no way I can go off track. She was
Yeah.
like, I am if those two numbers are met, like whatever I've like filled in is probably okay. I was like, you know what? Like sometimes it is nice to like get to these like simple little rules, which is where like you have ended up because it just makes some of it easy in a very confusing industry.
Well, and you can, that's a good point because you can also, for those people who feel too distraught about the possibility of giving up anything, you can take a crowding out strategy. You can
Yeah.
say, I'll always start my day with 16 ounces of healthy green goodness, right? Some type of a green smoothie with whatever you think really belongs in that. Um, and you can slowly increase your always rules so that there's no room for or minimal room for the bad stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back. You talked about your kind of journey through this. When you were going through some of the kind of yo-yo, slight weight loss, weight gain, I know a lot of people relate to that. What was your mindset around? Were you in school during that time? Were you
I
getting
mean,
your PhD?
it was 20 years. So it
Okay.
started when I was getting my PhD until I was about 41, 42.
Was there a point where you kind of hit like, okay, I'm gonna figure this out? Was there multiple of those points? What was the psychology behind you working through some of this stuff? Was there a mindset shift that happened somewhere along the way?
There was a mindset shift. Unfortunately, it's something that could have happened in my 20s. It didn't happen until my 40s. Um, I, you know, I was born in a family of psychologists, and they were, you know, psychoanalytic psychotherapy kind of psychologists. And so when something broke in the house, everybody knew how to ask it how it felt and nobody knew how to fix it. And I say that as illustrative of the fact that I was brought up with an analytic soul. I really thought that the most of the value in life came from turning inward and reflecting on things. And so that's where I did most of my work. But I had a dual career. I was a child and family psychologist. I didn't set out to work with overeaters. Um, and I was also consulting for industry. And in retrospect, I saw all the money they were spending to overcome our reptilian brain. I knew that the reptilian brain didn't know anything about love. Here I'm trying to love myself thin, but I knew the reptilian brain didn't know anything about love because when the reptilian brain assesses something in the environment, it says, do I eat that thing? Do I mate with that thing? Or do I kill that thing? It's like a really bad college drinking game. It's eat, mate, or kill, right?
Right.
It's the mammalian brain on top of that that says, before you eat, mate, or kill that thing, what impact is that going to have on the people that I love and my tribe and my community? And then it's the neocortex that says, what impact does that have on my long-term goals like weight loss and health and fitness, but also spirituality and music and art and contribution and work and everything like that. And so in retrospect, when I was having these cravings and thinking, oh, poor baby, you must, you must need a hug or something like that. I was doing the exact wrong thing. I was basically trying to nurture the mammalian brain, which had nothing to do with the problem. And it made me feel more entitled for this thing to go through, right? When I decided instead, when I finally woke up and I saw this and I said, wait a minute, I can't take this love yourself, then nurture your inner wounded child. This problem is because your mama dropped you in your head kind of thing. I, I, I have to be more of an alpha wolf of my own mind. That's when the change really happened for me, and I realized that there are places that I already was an alpha wolf of my own mind. This is just a biological urge. That's all it is. Same thing with the urges that my testicles create. Same thing with the urges that my bladder creates. If I really had to pee right now, Dr. Derrick, I would still continue the interview, or I tell my bladder, look, I'll get to you, but I'm in control. I have social goals. I have work goals. I have, commitments. I'm a functioning member of society. So you're just going to have to wait. If there's an attractive woman on the street, I don't go run down and kiss her. Actually, run the other way because I'm kind of shy. But like even if I wasn't, I wouldn't run down and kiss her. There are social norms and ways to approach people like that. Um, and I said, well, why does food have to be any different? And that's what really led me to the conclusion. There's another story about a long talk I had with my mom. I don't think we have time for that today. Um, but but that's what led me to the conclusion that I had to take control in more of a tough love in your own mind kind of way versus and it led me, like, I don't regret all the psychological work that I did. I think it made me a more compassionate, soulful person, but I don't think it really helped me with food. I think that when I was 41, 42 years old and I figured this out, and I just started focusing on very practical techniques, which the culmination of which is the methodology that I told you about. And I kept a journal for 8 years, writing down what the pig said and what other people said. It doesn't take 8 years anymore. I figured out how to fix people's thinking really quickly. But all that practical focus is really what got me better. And so I tell people, look, if you want to figure out what your demons are, I'm all for it. If you need a hug, I've got a hug, but I've got no mercy for this thing inside you. This thing is ruining your life, ruined my life for, first half of my life. And I'd like to save you from that. Let's focus on the practicalities of overcoming overeating. You can talk to a therapist about the traumas that are left thereafter. So
Once you started doing some of that, what was your first, do you remember for you, what was your first rule?
my first rule is I'll never have chocolate during the week again, which eventually for me evolved with chocolate only,
Uh-huh.
that I would never have chocolate at all. I tried to uphold the conditional rules. I got better with it. I got better with the not having chocolate during the week. But I found I was saying screw it, just do it a little too often.
Yeah.
And I came to the conclusion that I was just too addicted to chocolate to keep having it. And so what I would do then is I would focus on everything that I would be giving up if I continued to have chocolate, right? So there's the fear of missing out, but there's also the joy of missing out because you're not giving up all those medical worries and, being tall and thin and fit and everything like that. So,
Yeah, like talking about why is food different. I think food, one of the difficult parts is that like we have to eat, right? We need to. So it's always built into our day. Whereas like something like, like gambling or sex or, any of these other like really detrimental kind of addictive types of things, we don't have to have them in our lives.
right.
And so like food is always on everyone's, that's not always, but it's certainly in our mindset, daily. And I think that's what makes this such a hard field, and why it's so valuable to have some sort of structure around it, because we can't just like, okay, I no longer deal with food anymore. That's not
You've got
that's
to
not
take,
really a good thing.
you have to take the lion out of the cage and walk it around the block 3 times a day.
Right, right.
It's not a black and white addiction. You can't give it up.
Yes, exactly. And I think
Yeah.
that's where it ends up in this kind of realm where it makes it harder for people to get a handle on it because it's always there, like every time. And having some sort of structure around it makes it really, really helpful.
Well, and this has a very calming psychological effect, and it empowers you in other areas of your life where you recognize the structure of mind can be used for, productivity and relationships and parenting and finances. And so if you can embrace this type of discipline as the foundation of freedom, you
Yeah.
know, you, discipline actually creates more freedom. People think it takes your freedom away, but Just look at the car, right? If it was not for the discipline of the engineers, you couldn't turn your wheel 30 degrees and have it go 30 degrees. And without having that ability, your radius of locomotion would be much smaller. You couldn't drive around the town or the country. So discipline actually creates freedom. Or the discipline of the jazz musician who can improvise their soul only comes because they practice the scales for so long and they know the underlying structure of the music. So if you can embrace this as a way of life, like Jim Rohn said that a life of discipline is better than a life of regret. And if you can embrace it as a way of life and enjoy it, and look at the oh my God, this gives me so much power. Like my life is so much better when I have this discipline as opposed to being at the mercy of my impulses and at the mercy of the food industry. And this gives me control over my life. If you can look at it like that, then the little bit of work you have to do up front, well, there's a bunch of work up front you have to do to make it work, to really think through the best set of rules and, go through the extinction curves and, get the bad stuff out of your system. But if you can embrace that, it's only a minimal amount of work to keep up the rest of your life. And it's work that you'll enjoy rather than work that you'll dread doing. So,
What I wanted you, do you have like kind of a little explanation of the extinction curve that we can kind of go through so people understand that?
right. So going back to our friend Thag, the caveman, Thag, the caveman, and the bananas and the monkeys in the banana tree. The monkey is a food signal, and the bananas are the reward. Okay, so Thag's brain secretes dopamine. He doesn't have to see the banana to secrete dopamine. He secretes dopamine when Thag's brain sees the monkey. Um, Now, suppose that Thag followed a monkey to a tree one day and it didn't have any bananas. Do you think that Thad would just give up and stop? He would stop chasing monkeys to trees. As a
No.
matter of fact, his brain would double down on the dopamine and try to make him more motivated to do it, because a monkey in a scarce food environment that leads to a banana tree 80% of the time is much better than no monkey at all. His brain would have recognized that things have become a little more scarce and it has to work harder. As a matter of fact, as the season wore on and all the banana trees got bare, Thag's brain would work harder and harder. And even a monkey that led to a banana tree 20% of the time would be more valuable than a monkey than having no way to find bananas at all. So that's called random reinforcement. It's called intermittent random reinforcement. It's the most powerful reinforcement schedule that we've discovered in behavioral psychology. This is why people are glued to slot machines, because you don't know when it's going to pay off. And the way I made that comment about the Saturday morning slot machine and how the casinos would be emptied out right away. Okay, so how does that relate to the extinction curve? Suppose I want to give up pizza because I'm developing a little punch and eating that pizza every way on the way home. I make a rule for myself that says I will never stop for pizza on the way home again. 30 days later, well, what happens immediately is I have a reduction in cravings. There's a little honeymoon period, but then the brain says, wait a minute, maybe this means that the pizza is intermittently available when I see the pizza place. Then you're going to have the worst cravings you've ever had. And most people give up at this point. I call this the where the F is my pizza curve. It's an extinction burst in the behavioral literature. Your brain is going to try to hold on to that learning and saying, maybe the monkey's not leading to the tree every time, but we got to find it, right? In this case, the pizza place is the monkey and the pizza is the bananas.
Yeah.
If you power through that, we talk about ways to power through, but if you power through that, then eventually you start down on the cravings curve. I think my finger's going out. Then you start going straight down. And there are a couple of little bursts, a couple of little last hurrahs of the brain seeing if maybe the piece is available somewhere around the 25 to 30 day mark. By the time you get to 40 days, it's labeled as dormant. That's an extinction curve. And the mistake most people make is giving up during the extinction burst, or randomly reinforcing the curve as they're getting close to being done with it, they think, I got this. I'm so confident. I'm not bothered by this at all. I can handle a little pizza when I pass the pizza place. No, you just randomly reinforce it. You reset the whole thing. You got to do it again. Um, so the way to go about this is to be very strategic and decide, what do I want to extinguish? Do I want to extinguish the pizza place all the time? Do I want to extinguish it just during the week and make it okay to stop on the weekends? But be very strategic, decide what you want to extinguish, and then make an extra effort to keep your body out of organismic distress during that period. Don't go into battle, with a plastic helmet. Say, this is going to be tough. I'm going to make myself some, you know, greens and beans, or, lean protein and vegetables, or I'm going to do whatever I can to keep my blood sugar very even over the course of this time. I'm going to get a little extra sleep. I'm going to drink a little extra water. I'm going to self-regulate like a boss during this 30 to 40 days. And then I'll be done with the thing. Then it's not going to bother me anymore. It's worth what it takes to get through it.
Yeah.
It's worth
Yeah.
it. So,
Yeah, thank you for doing that. That's really valuable. I think that kind of puts like science behind what we've told people a lot, is like, expect these little hard points along the way at 7 days. These are random, but 7 days, 21 days, 30 days, like you're going to have these little hard parts that you need to power through. And if
yeah.
you expect those and you make a plan around them, you're going to, be much more likely to succeed at the end.
Hmm.
I never knew why, but we've always told people that, like, it's going to be hard at like the 7 to 10 days, like 20 to 25 days. You're going to have another little hiccup where it's like, why is this so hard again? I thought I had a nice little rhythm to it. That's beautiful.
See,
That's good
see,
stuff.
and your pig will tell you that you're going to be tortured forever with this, and that everything else tastes awful, and it's just going to make you miserable forever. But it's not true. It does go away, because it wouldn't be efficient for the brain to continue craving something that it's never going to do, that it's never going to do. So,
This might be a strange question, but I think it's valid. So, what should people do first? Like, if somebody's listening to this, other than dig deeper into your information, of course, what's the first thing? Because I think there's probably ways they can set themselves up for success. But what would you recommend people start with if they're trying to go down this journey?
well, like I said, I like to start people with one simple rule. It's what most people know. If everybody in your audience were to take a breath now, what's one thing that wouldn't feel too onerous, that you could and would do, but it would still convince you you're going in the right direction? You still begin to get, and you'd learn how the game is played, and you'd go through your first extinction curve. What's one thing that you could and would do that would be a significant improvement? And you remember, you know, if the ship is going in the wrong direction and all you do is make a turn, even if you haven't sped up and gone all the way back to where you need to go, you're still dramatically in a better place than you were when you started. So that's what we're trying to accomplish, is how do we just prove to ourselves that we're turning the ship around and capable of taking control with one simple rule. If you don't know what else to do, and it seems like nothing has ever worked for you, you could try no sugar, flour, or alcohol for 90 days. If you don't know what it seems like it's a hard rule, but it's actually easier than you would think it is, because you will go through an extinction curve for those things, and you need to kind of think through, where are all the food stimuli, where are you going to get the cravings, when are you going to get the cravings, make a plan, write down your intentions. Um, but you could do that if you don't know what else to do. Most people don't start with something that big. So
If you're ambitious, listen up. That's a good 1-2 punch,
mhm.
to really get this under control.
And Derek, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you do that, you want to define sugar and flour really well. It's better to define it inclusively rather than exclusively, because there's so much hidden sugar in everything. So you could say, the only sweet taste I will ever have again during this 90-day period are X, Y, and Z. Write down what sweet taste you're allowed to have. The only starchy, floury taste that I will have during this time are X, Y, and Z. Write down what you can have versus what you can't have.
Yeah, we did a while back. We did no sugar and no sugar substitutes um, for Lent, and that was incredibly like not difficult once we got it going. We actually felt amazing, but to go and start searching of all the stuff that they're hiding sugar in,
Yeah.
like sauces, sugar alcohols, all like it was just we got to where we were like, let's just prepare almost everything for ourselves because I just don't trust anything that's coming
It's
in.
in everything. Yeah. So you need a tripwire that says if it tastes sweet and it's not one of these discreetly itemized lists, then it's no good.
I love it. I love it. Glenn, where can people find more information about you, about Defeat Your Cravings? Where can they follow you? Where can they get more of this information? You talked about kind of working with people. How can they do all that?
Ironically, it's at defeatyourcravings.com. Defeatyourcravings.com. Click the big blue button, and I've got three things for you. You can get a free copy of the book in Kindle, Nook, or PDF format. Those are the electronic formats. The traditional formats, Audible, paperback, they have a charge. You will get a set of food plan starter templates for just about any dietary philosophy. This is a diet agnostic philosophy, and we give a lot of thought to how people might apply it to keto versus macrobiotic versus point counting, calorie counting, whole foods, whatever you're doing. There's a set of starter templates. I call them starter templates because I'm not going to tell you how to eat. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not a dietitian. I've spent an awful lot of time talking to people about it, but I'm not one. So I don't tell anybody how to eat. Diet agnostic. And I know that this sounds kind of weird in the abstract. Like, why does Derrick have a doctor on with a pig inside of him, and what's going on here? And it sounds like it would be cold and cruel, but it's not. It's a very compassionate, life-giving process. So I recorded a whole bunch of full-length coaching sessions for you to hear how I actually take people through the process. Uh, defeatyourcravings.com. Click on the big blue button. Everything else that we offer, you'll be led to if you do that. Our coaching systems, our other products. Defeatyourcravings.com.
I love it. Thank you for all the information that you're putting out there. I know this is a big part of getting people healthier, and we talk about it a lot. That's why we do this. But certainly having a good way of getting the right fuel into your body in the right amounts is paramount to doing that. So thank you for all the energy and time and effort. I am like on the back end of finishing my first book. So when you come on and you say, how many books do you have now? Is it 9?
This is my eighth book. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for doing what you do. I'm like,
Well, you
goodness
know,
gracious.
when you the way that happened, besides the fact that I liked to write, was I just kept working with as many people as possible, and oh, there's this issue, there's that issue, there's this issue, that issue, and the books kind of just wrote themselves as we figured out how to solve the issue. So you got
Well,
to make the time.
that's good to hear. This one certainly has not written itself, but
Okay, well, we can talk about that a different time.
right, right.
Okay.
I do have to ask you our question that we ask all of our guests. If somebody listening to this can do one thing today to improve their health, what would that one thing be?
Make one simple rule. I've got the same answer. It's
I
like,
thought that might be what it is.
yeah, one simple rule.
I
Um,
love it.
in Peter McWilliams, who was a kind of self-help guru in the 80s, he said, you can have anything you want, but you can't have everything you want. You can have anything you want, but you can't have everything you want. So start to adopt disciplines that focus on what you want, and it will involve letting go of things that you don't want.
That is a fantastic way for y'all to take this information and put it into action, people. Dr. Glenn Livingston, thank you so much, man.
Talk to you later.